Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Yashodanandana Prajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Prajajana Ranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Shri Shri Radha Radhanath ki jai, Shri Giriraj Govardhan ki jai, Shri Gaura Hari ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Premanande. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naranchaivam Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udhirayet Nashtaprayashu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shlokir Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki Shrinvata Swagatam Krishna Punya Shavana Kirtaneha Hriyantasto He Abhadrani Vidunoti Suritsatam. Hare Krishna. We are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 25, the characteristics of King Puranjana, text 5. Raja Vacha Najanami Mahabhaga Param Karma Pavidhadi Bruhi Me Vimalam Jnanam Yena Mucheya Karmabhi. Raja Vacha Najanami Mahabhaga Param Karma Pavidhadi Bruhi Me Vimalam Jnanam Yena Mucheya Karmabhi. Raja Vacha Najanami Mahabhaga Param Karma Pavidhadi Bruhi Me Vimalam Jnanam Yena Mucheya Karmabhi. Raja Vacha Najanami Mahabhaga Param Karma Pavidhadi Bruhi Me Vimalam Jnanam Yena Mucheya Karmabhi. Raja Vacha Najanami Mahabhaga Param Karma Pavidhadi Bruhi Me Vimalam Jnanam Yena Mucheya Karmabhi. Raja Vacha Najanami Mahabhaga Param Karma Pavidhadi Bruhi Me Vimalam Jnanam Yena Mucheya Karmabhi. Raja Vacha. The king replied, Na, not. Janami, I know. Mahabhaga, O great soul. Param, transcendental. Karma, by fruitive activities. Apavidha, being pierced. Di, my intelligence. Bruhi, please tell me unto me. Vimalam, spotless. Jnanam, knowledge. Yena, by which. Mucheya, I can get relief. Karmabhi, from the fruit of activities. Translation. The king replied, O great soul Narada, my intelligence is entangled in fruitive activities. Therefore, I do not know the ultimate goal of life. Kindly instruct me in pure knowledge so that I can get out of the entanglement of fruitive activities. Purport. By His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Sri Narottam Das Thakur has sung, Sat Sanga Chari Koinu Asate Vilas, Te Karane Lagila Ye Karma Bhanda Fans. As long as a person is entangled in fruitive activities, he is bound to accept one body after another. This is called karma bhanda fans, entanglement in fruitive activities. It does not matter whether one is engaged in pious or impious activities, for both are causes for further entanglement in material bodies. By pious activities, one can take birth in a rich family and get a good education and a beautiful body. But this does not mean that the distresses of life are ultimately eliminated. In the Western countries, it is not unusual for one to take birth in a rich, aristocratic family, nor is it unusual for one to have a good education and a very beautiful body. But this does not mean that Westerners are free from the distresses of life. Although at the present moment, the younger generation in Western countries have sufficient education, beauty, and wealth, and although there is enough food, clothing, and facilities for sense gratification, they are in distress. Indeed, they are so distressed that they become hippies, and the laws of nature force them to accept a wretched life. Thus they go about unclean and without shelter or food, and they are forced to sleep in the street. It can be concluded that one cannot become happy by simply performing pious activities. It is not a fact that those who are born with a silver spoon in their mouth are free from the material miseries of birth, old age, disease, and death. The conclusion is that one cannot be happy simply by executing pious or impious activities. Such activities simply cause entanglement and transmigration from one body to another. Narottam Das Thakur calls this karma bhanda fans. King Prachina Barisat admitted this fact and frankly asked Narada Muni how he could get out of this karma bhanda fans, entanglement in fruitive activities. This is actually the stage of knowledge indicated in the first verse of Vedanta Sutra, Atato Brahma Jigyasa. When one actually reaches the platform of frustration in an attempt to discharge karma bhanda fans, he inquires about the real value of life, which is called Brahma Jigyasa. In order to inquire about the ultimate goal of life, the Vedas, the Mundaka Upanishad 11.2.12 enjoin, Tad Vijnanartham sa gurum eva bhagichate. In order to understand the transcendental science, one must approach a bona fide spiritual master. King Prachina Barisat found the best spiritual master, Narada Muni, and he therefore asked him about that knowledge by which one can get out of the entanglement of karma bhanda fans, fruitive activities. This is the actual business of human life. Jivasya tattva jigyasa narto yascheha karma bhi. As stated in the second chapter of the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam 1-10, a human being's only business is inquiring from a bona fide spiritual master about extrication from the entanglement of karma bhanda fas. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Titinamine. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunivari Paschachade Shatarine. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyaiva cha patitanam bhavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Giradhar Shivasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. The king replied, O great soul Narada, my intelligence is entangled in fruitive activities, and therefore I do not know the ultimate goal of life. Kindly instruct me in pure knowledge so that I can get out of the entanglement of fruitive activities. Hare Krishna. As always, I ask the blessings and the mercy of all of the assembled Vaishnavas. Please allow me to share something today that is beneficial to our spiritual and material lives, as well as pleasing to the ears and hearts of all of the devotees. So today's verse, Narada has come to King Prachinabarhisat, and we are going to be again blessed with a wonderful discussion between these two elevated personalities. And we are getting a glimpse, actually, into the good fortune that arises when one completely surrenders to the will of the Lord in devotional service. So in the previous verse, just to recap, it was last week, Narada came before the king, and he asked him very straightforwardly, King, what do you hope to achieve by doing all of these pious activities, all of these fire sacrifices, all of these activities that you are just engaged in? What's the aim here, right? Because simply, as Prabhupada is saying, simply by just doing pious activities or impious activities, any activity for that matter, it doesn't actually bring you true freedom on the highest sense of the word, freedom. And in today's verse, we see King Barhisat is saying, Na janami. He's saying, actually, I don't know. I don't know what the goal of life is. I don't actually truly know what is good for me. And he says, actually, my intelligence has been spoiled by everything I've been doing thus far through these fruitive activities, these engagements. So actually, oh great sage, I don't really know what I'm doing. So actually, you guide me, you instruct me, tell me what it is that I should actually be doing with my life. And we see, up until this point, the Bhagavatam is full of these kinds of descriptions of wonderful dialogues between saintly persons and confused people, right? And the good fortune that comes after these kinds of dialogues, right? And we see when Narada comes, most of the fourth canto, we're reading about the descendants of Dhruva Maharaj. And we can see just in this one lineage how much good fortune there is, right? Narada spoke to Dhruva himself. King Prithu came, the Lord came personally and spoke to Maharaj Prithu after the failed attempt of the 100 Ashwamedha Yagya. We saw in the previous chapter, Lord Shiva came and spoke to the sons of King Prachinabarhisat. Now Narada is coming again to speak to the father, right? So wonderful. And this name, Prachinabarhisat, is very interesting. The word Barisat is another word for kusha grass. Kusha grass is something very essential for doing yagyas and sacrifices. So we can see just by his name how fond the king was of doing ritualistic activities, that it became just a part of his identity, the way he was called, right? So wherever he went in the world, because he was the emperor, he would travel around the world to the different, kingdoms doing his stately duties. He would instruct his servants that you should grow kusha grass wherever I'm coming, so I can constantly do my ritualistic activities. Because when you do a fire yagyas, you need to sit on kusha grass, right? So he, in one sense, he wasn't wrong. He was just trying to execute the scriptural injunctions, the karmakanda activities of the Vedas that are there, right? But something was missing in all of this. And we can see that because he wasn't being elevated by his practice in any way. In actual, it was entangling him more and more. And what was missing is that he was not actually doing this as an offering to the Lord. He was doing it with some conscious or unconscious motive in mind, right? So Narada comes, and we see another very amazing quality of a saintly person, that when a saintly person comes and we engage with them on the spiritual path, they speak to us on the level that we're at. In this case, like if you see in the previous chapter, Lord Shiva is speaking to the sons of King Prachina Barisat, but he immediately, as soon as he meets them, he starts, directly speaking the glories of devotional service, the glories of the Lord and his form and his pastimes and his qualities. Doesn't beat around the bush here, there, go through the yoga ladder or anything. He just goes straight. This is what devotional service is. These are the glories of devotional service. And the Prachetas are so purified in their consciousness that they can accept it immediately. And they accept it, and for the next 10,000 years, they are submerged in the water, and they recite the Rudra Gita for 10,000 years in that way, because they were capable of hearing directly the glories of the Lord. But we see another example if we go back to the first canto of the Bhagavatam, the conversation between Vidura and Dhritarashtra, right in the beginning. So the war of Kurukshetra has just ended. Dhritarashtra has lost all of his sons, of course, but he and his wife are living with the Pandavas, and they continue to live with the Pandavas for many, many years. I mean, can you imagine living with the killers of your children, And in that way, right? And at the end, towards the end of his life, Vidura comes to him and he chastises him in one sense. And he says, you're old now, you need to give up living in this palatial life, living with the Pandavas who you actively tried to kill throughout their whole life. Don't you have any shame in one sense, You should go to the forest, you should retire, and you should meditate now. You should just purify yourself whatever time you have left, right? And it's stated in that part that Dhritarashtra at that time, he could not hear the direct glories of the Lord or the glories of pure devotional service, because throughout his life, he didn't oppose the atrocities against the Pandavas, the devotees of the Lord. So that impiety or that sinful behavior covered his consciousness, right? So he was not qualified then to receive knowledge of pure devotional service directly. And it's no fault of Vidura. Vidura is an incarnation of Yamaraj himself. Vidura fully understands the glories of pure selfless devotional service. He could have given it to Dhritarashtra because Vidura himself was a pure devotee. But he knew that this is not going to be useful to Dhritarashtra because he is not on the level of consciousness that can accept this. So I'll speak what will be beneficial for him in this way. So we see Narada has come to King Barisat and he's asked him very, very straightforwardly. He doesn't come and glorify him or pacify him or speak sweet words or anything like that. He's very straightforward and to the point asks him, these activities that you are doing, they neither mitigate your misery or your suffering, nor do they actually bring you any happiness. So why are you doing this? He just cuts to the chase very, very quickly, right? And the king, this is his, you could say, his good fortune. He's coming in the line of Dhruva Maharaj. He's obviously no ordinary personality in any sense. But he, just through that one question, it opens his vision to understanding, okay, I don't actually know what I'm doing here. So he can easily admit to Narada Muni that actually my intelligence, my consciousness is polluted by everything that I've been doing. And King Barisat is humble enough to say that actually, Narada, I don't know, right? He doesn't get defensive. Like, "Oh, what do you mean? This is in the Shastra, it's in the Vedas. I'm not doing anything wrong. How can you speak to me like this? I'm the emperor of the whole world." Shri Shri Radha Radhanath ki jai, Shri Giriraj Govardhan ki jai, Shri Gaura Hari ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. King Barisat is humble enough to understand that if I truly want a fruitful and beneficial life, I need to surrender to a saintly person. So this is his point of surrender. And it reminds us in some way of Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita, his point of surrender to Krishna, where he frankly admits, you tell me what is best for me. He puts down his bow, he says what he has to say, he shares his doubts with the Lord, but he says, "Oh Govinda, I'm leaving it up to you at this point. You tell me what is best for me." And if you think of the king, he's the emperor of the whole universe. He's a pretty big guy, What more, materially speaking, does he have to achieve in his life? He's reached the pinnacle of success, of material success in that sense. But still, he's not happy. He's still suffering. This reminds me of, there's it's a memory of Prabhupada. I can't remember the disciple who was sharing the memory, was possibly Atma Tattva. So Prabhupada was in India. I think it was maybe the first time that he went back since going to the West. And, when he was in the city, so many politicians and industrialists and famous, well-to-do people would come to see him. So this one politician came and he met Prabhupada, and he's this he was actually a big industrialist. One of the biggest industrialists in India, had many, many factories and businesses, and just a very rich man. And he came and he said, "Swamiji, I have these factories, I'm in this industry, I'm in that industry, I have connections here, there, everywhere. I have so much, but I can't sleep at night." And Prabhupada looked at him and he said, "That's why you can't sleep at night." And then he said, Prabhupada looked at him and he said, "No, we can help you. We can relieve you of your problems." So he looked at the disciples and he said, take this man's address. And the man got, a bit taken back. "No, Swami, you call me. I can come whenever you want to see me. That's not a problem." And Prabhupada insisted to the disciple, "No, take his address. We should also be able to come to see you anytime. Just give all of this to us. We'll relieve you of your problems. You'll be able to sleep at night." And the man was very taken aback. He wasn't expecting that. Eventually, he had to give his address. What can you do if Prabhupada is asking, right? But yes, all of these things, do they actually benefit our life in any way is the question, right? And Prabhupada is saying in the purport that actual, real human life begins from the point of spiritual inquiry. And it begins from the point of inquiring to a bona fide source of spiritual knowledge, submissively hearing from someone in this way. Because spiritual knowledge is such a thing that you cannot speculate or make assumptions, right? Because you are dealing with something that is beyond the material perception of life. And we, at our current stage, cannot truly understand spiritual knowledge as it is because we are covered, right? We know that the human form of life, for example, there are, the 4 defects, imperfect senses, prone to cheating, so on and so forth. So already we have so much against us, in one sense, just with the sense perception that we have, that we're going to view things through that imperfect lens. So we cannot make assumptions and speculate about what the absolute truth is. We need someone who has seen the absolute truth as it is, for what it is. And we get instruction and guidance in this way. And Prabhupada, he's speaking about the hippies in the purport because of course, when he was writing the purports, he was in the midst of all of this, right? And he's describing how the young people, or just society in general, people are so frustrated with the world and the material energy that they don't know what to do, that they come from such aristocratic families, they have good monies, they have good education, they have wealth, they have physical beauty, they have everything externally that you could possibly want. But what happens? They turn to drugs, they turn to alcohol, they turn to illicit sex, they turn to all of these other things, looking for belonging and happiness. But what happens? They become more and more frustrated, and then Prabhupada says, for example, they're pushed into a wretched state of existence, right? And you think about Prabhupada's own experience in his own life when he lived in the Bowery. There's one, I can't remember, it was probably Chasing Rhinos, the biography written by Shama Sundar, potentially that one, where he writes a little bit about the Bowery. And it's described, or maybe it was the Lilamrita, it describes the Bowery as the armpit of the universe. Nothing about that, just that description. You know, imagine the kind of people that live in the Bowery, homeless people, drug addicts. Prabhupada lived with, before going to Matchless Gifts, remember he lived with the young boy who became a drug addict and had a very bad LSD trip and went crazy and wanted to attack him, right? Prabhupada has first-hand experience of the material energy, you know, in that way. And that's why this Prabhupada is very straightforward, you know, in that sense. And we just look at the world, you know, the people or the role models that everyday people admire, the celebrities, the musicians, the influencers that, you know, they emulate and they want to be like. Their personal lives are just disasters, you know, coming from dysfunctional families, not working through that, themselves becoming dysfunctional people of society, and then, you know, raising families in that way. And you can see how it just filters down through generations like that, all of this, right? And we all think, or still there's a lot of us, even though, for example, we may have access to spiritual knowledge, still we want to try, right? Still we want to put our best foot forward in material life. And we think that, no, if I just have these material advantages, I can make something of my life. I'll be happy, I'll be okay, I'll be peaceful. That's not to say, though, that we shouldn't be responsible, because at the end of the day, we have responsibilities. There are many of us that have families that need money, that need engagement in the material energy in order to survive. But at the end of the day, it's the intention behind why we're engaging with the material energy. And we see that, right? There's so many people, they want to study, they want to move overseas, they want to find a job because they think it will be better in a different country. If I just go here, if I go there, if my degree is from this university, or, you know, if I've studied this kind of subject, you know, but that's no guarantee of happiness, right? Even if, for example, you know, there's this growing trend in the world, you know, you can work from home, you know. You think you have more time when you work from home, but there's no enjoyment, there's no freedom. Now you're on call 24/7 because you work from home. The manager can phone you at 9 o'clock in the night and you don't have an excuse. Your laptop is at home, you have a Wi-Fi connection, you know. There's no boundary or barrier at all. You know, we think, okay, I can work from home, I'll save on the traveling, I'll save on this and that. But there's a whole other side that takes away a different aspect of freedom. And we see that, right? Life after life, we're going through different bodies, as Prabhupada is saying in the purport, because we're thinking that just doing pious activities will bring us some freedom. But all of the fields of bodies we're going through are exactly the same. We're looking for the same sense gratification in any body, right? No matter animal, insect, human, whatever it is. Just when you come to the human platform, your sense gratification is a little more sophisticated in one sense, right? Because you've got a bit more higher intelligence. But Prabhupada just smashes that. right? And he says, actually, the purpose of human life, of intelligent life, is to inquire atato brahma jigyasa, right? And it's very interesting that this atato brahma jigyasa, this is the first sort of line of the Vedanta Sutra. But we see in Kali Yuga that even just to come to the point of atato brahma jigyasa, you have to go through so much. It's not that just because you're human, you are guaranteed, as with other ages, that there's higher consciousness and you automatically know that there's more to life that I need to look for. You have to first be trained in how to be a human being in Kali Yuga. Now, that's what it is, right? But even we see, sometimes, even in spiritual circles, right? Theoretically, we may understand atato brahma jigyasa. I must inquire into spiritual knowledge, into spiritual understanding. But consciously or unconsciously, we still have these other desires for sense gratification. And they may be very unconscious. You may not even know they're there. You know, the desire for fame, the desire for position and power. These are things that are rooted in lower nature. But they're there still in us. And we have to, through our process of spiritual life, purify ourselves. And that's not easy, because we don't know what we're coming with into this life from all our previous lives, what we're carrying. That even the basics of human life, of Vedic understanding, we have to teach ourselves how to ask that question, right? And not just the basics of human life, how even to go beyond the material perception of reality. Right? Because we get so caught up in the process of living in the world, of engaging in activity, and of being bound in these things. There's later on in the 10th canto, and even in the Krishna book, there's the pastime of King Riga. King Riga is a very pious king, and I think he's a Vaishnava. Yes, he's a devotee of Lord Vishnu, but he's a king, and he's very attached to doing pious activities, you know, giving cows in charity, feeding the brahmanas, protecting the citizens. Yes, all things he should be doing, but he is very much engaged in that. And it's described that the sort of the piety he has incurred through his pious activities, it can be compared to the number of grains of sand on the beach. That's how much good fortune or how much piety he has incurred through all of his activities in that way. But if you know the pastime, he made one unconscious mistake. One unconscious mistake. What happened? He gave, I don't know how many, 10,000 cows or something to one brahmana, or it was probably more than that. And unknowingly, one cow that he gave away wandered back into his Goshala. And then when another brahmana came, he gave more cows away, and that cow was given away. So sort of given to two people. And he didn't know that the cow came back and he gave it away. But somehow the brahmanas, they understood through their mystic power that, wait, one of my cows is gone and it's come back and you've given it away. And this, this error in his pious activities, he was cursed to become a lizard for that. Then you would think to yourself, oh no, I mean, okay, eventually, yes, it was his good fortune because he met the Supreme Lord himself in that way. But then you would think to myself, unconsciously that happened and he became a lizard. What am I going to do, Should I even engage with the material energy if this is like the danger or the possibility of that you don't know when you're making a mistake, you don't know when you're going to fall into a so-called trap by what you're doing, you don't know how bound you're going to be by your activities, right? And you think, so it's very interesting that today King Barisat, he's acknowledging that yes, okay, even though I've been, if I could say, morally good, and I've been doing deeds that are appropriate and good for the world and for myself, but they haven't freed me from suffering. Then you can ask, well, then what's the use of being, a good person? But Barisat acknowledges that, okay, I have knowledge, but what I'm lacking is spiritual knowledge, right? Because at the end of the day, when we have the slightest kind of material intention behind something, that is binding. Anything that's not related to Krishna, for the service of Krishna, to please Krishna, will bind us, right? And it's very interesting. In the verse, King Barisat uses the word intelligence. My intelligence is polluted. Not that, my activities are not good or something. He says, no, the root cause, my intelligence is not fixed as to where it should be, right? And you would think to yourself, okay, but karma is activities, it is action. But we know that our activities, they influence the way we think, right? They influence our decisions and our values. So even if we are engaged in spiritual activities, if we are consciously or unconsciously motivated by something like comfort or reward or position or safety or something like that, it will bind us in some way. Because devotional service is unmotivated, uninterrupted. It is pure and it is selfless. So King Barisat, he asks Narada that, share with me, and he uses the word Vimala Jnanam. Vimala means spotless knowledge, truly spiritualized knowledge that in itself is not tainted by anything else, right? But he says, teach me knowledge that will free me, actually. True freedom. He doesn't say, okay, teach me knowledge that will allow me to continue what I'm doing, he doesn't say, teach me knowledge that frees me from suffering, or teach me knowledge that makes me happy. He says, teach me knowledge that is spotless and frees me from everything, right? And then I was thinking when I was then, what's the point? Because we all come, even to devotional life, with some motivation for something. We don't come because, oh Krishna, I want to serve you, or at least me. Initially, that's not why I came, right? But Krishna holds space for people like us still. He is so kind and compassionate, right? We hear in the Gita of the 4 kinds of pious people that do come to the Lord: the distressed, the desirer of wealth, the seeker of knowledge, and is it the inquisitive, right? Yeah. The 4 kinds of people that come. So we can understand that even if we come from this sort of background with desiring something, with wanting something, initially it's okay. Whatever desire you have, you'd rather come to the Lord than go anywhere else at the end of the day, right? But the point is, you can't stay at that space where you're here because you want something. You have to, through your process of devotional service, become purified of these motivations and these intentions. I mean, imagine if the distressed came to Krishna and they stayed distressed. They weren't purified, they didn't find safety in the Lord. Or the desire of wealth came and they stayed poor. They didn't get any wealth. That's not a good marketing strategy for Krishna. That doesn't speak well. If you come with this, and at the end of everything, you're still stuck with that. You haven't moved beyond that. Even like Dhruva, right? The person who started us off, who started this whole lineage off. He came because he wanted wealth, right? But we see through his process how he was purified of that, and how, because he was purified of that, surrendered and accepted that, he was given something far greater than he could have ever imagined. Because at the end of the day, we have to ask ourselves, why would we want to drag on in the material existence? Because even, just this one life that we can remember is tiring enough, right? And so why would we want to continue? Because this is not the conclusion of what bhakti is, right? But even in our spiritual life, sometimes we do unconsciously or consciously become complacent with our practice of devotional service. Yes, I know I'm not the body. Devotional service is the ultimate goal of life. Devotees, so on and so forth. But if we truly ask ourselves, what does it mean to be free and to be liberated on the spiritual path, right? Krishna says that pure freedom is engaging in the activities of the soul. And that is, at the end of the day, service to Krishna. Otherwise, we're just going to keep on coming back to the material world. And that is what real freedom and real liberation is for the devotee. Engagement in selfless devotional service. There's a pastime, I think it's from the Gita Mahatmya. So the Gita Mahatmya is a very wonderful conversation between Lord Shiva and Mother Parvati, where he is sharing the glories of the Bhagavad Gita, and he's sharing the glories of each chapter by chapter. And this is he's speaking about the 18th chapter, which is in the Gita Mahatmya, it's glorified as the greatest of all of the chapters of the Gita, right? So he's sharing this pastime of once King Indra was sitting in his court in the heavenly planets in Amaravati, and he was surrounded by, the demigods, the ministers, the rishis, the sages, the apsaras, and they were all singing his glories, Jayapataka Swami was sharing this pastime, and he says, the Gandharvas are praising him, and they're singing, Jaya Indra Deva, Jaya Indra Deva, Jaya Indra Deva, Jaya Indra Deva. So they're just singing his glories in this way. And everything is, as they say, hunky-dory, everything's fine. And suddenly the Vishnu Dutas come, and they enter the court, and Indra stands up, and he says, what can I do for you? Thank you for coming. They just walk right past him. They ignore him, straight past him. And there's this unassuming, Brahmana in the corner there. They walk up to him, they grab him, and they pull him, and they put him at the feet of the throne, and poof, the Brahmana becomes Indra. He just, he's just replaced. And then there's the ex-Indra just standing there, and he's like, he doesn't know what happened. He was Indra, and he's just been replaced in the blink of an eye. And the demigods are looking at each other, the sages are looking at each other, everyone's looking at each other. They look at the throne, and there's someone who's Indra. So, Jaya Indra Deva, Jaya Indra Deva. Okay, this is Indra now, that's it. We're carrying on. And this ex-Indra Dev, he gets pretty worked up. He's like, well, what just happened? I'm Indra. I did all of the austerities, all of the penances, the 100 Ashwamedha Yagyas, the climbing of the Himalayas, whatever, activities I needed to do. And the Vishnu Dutas are like, we're just doing what we're supposed to do. So if you have an issue, go take it up with Vishnu, go take it up. So he goes to the Milk Ocean, and he calls out for Vishnu, and, Vishnu comes and he says, yes, what can I do for you? And he says, I used to be Indra. I was your Indra. You put me there. And he starts getting worked up again. I did the 100 Ashwamedha Yagyas. I did the penances, the fasting, the austerities, the whatever, worship Meenakshi Devi, Shiva, whatever I need to do. What happened? And then this other guy, that you just replaced me with, as far as I can see, he hasn't done anything. He's just a poor Brahmana. He hasn't done a tenth of what I've done, And Vishnu looks at him and just closes his eyes for a minute. And then he says, yes, you did all of these penances, and you did all of these austerities, and you did all of these big external things. But that's not important to me, right? He said, and Vishnu says, the sacrifices that you have done, the penances you have done, they are like the dry, sour fruits on the tree. Those very first initial, little peaches or plums or whatever that you bite and they're so sour because they haven't reached maturity yet. And sometimes the tree goes through those a few times before it gives a good crop. He says, like, your penances are like that, actually. They're not ripe. They're not juicy in any way. And I put this Brahmana in the place of Indra because he's made me happy. He's pleased me, right? And then this ex-Indra asks, okay, well, then what did he do that pleased you so much? And Vishnu says, every day he would sit in the morning in the temple, and all he would do is chant five verses from the 18th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. But he put so much of love and sincerity into all of that, and I liked that very much. So I have made him Indra. So this ex-Indra thinks about it for a minute, says, okay. Then he comes down, I guess, I don't know where, to which planetary system, and he finds a guru. And he says, okay, you teach me the 18th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. And every day he studies it. And he starts dedicating his life to that. Because he thinks, okay, if this is what Vishnu wants, let me try. So every day he starts and he learns and he learns. Let me just do this to please him. Because he says that he finds this pleasing. I'll try it. So he does it for many, many times. And then eventually, yes, the Vishnu Dutas come and they say, okay, it's you again. So what would you like? Would you like to be Indra again? Because that's possible now. And this Indra, former Indra, he thinks about it. But then he has become so purified by his service that his vision has now expanded. And he says, Indra, been there, done that. I don't need to do it again. But what I have learned from my recitation is that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And the most important thing for the devotee is to return to him. So if you can you take me there? And they say, okay. So he goes back to the spiritual world because he has been purified, right? And I'll just conclude with something I saw yesterday on Facebook. There's this devotee, his name is Chaitanya Chandra, I think. He writes very nicely about, different spiritual things. And he was writing about Maharaj Prithu a little bit. And I thought, well, it's nice, we're still in that lineage of Maharaj Prithu. And he's just writing about pleasing the Lord. So he says that a very significant passage of the Srimad Bhagavatam is the appearance of Lord Vishnu in the sacrificial arena of Prithu Maharaj, after the sacrifice had been repeatedly frustrated by Indra. We often associate the mercy of the Lord with success in our spiritual endeavors, but that's a case where the opposite occurred. Prithu Maharaj was unsuccessful in his desire to perform 100 sacrifices, and despite his failure, the Lord appeared to him, not exactly because he failed, but due to his attitude to this failure. This emphasis that the ultimate purpose in all our activities should be to satisfy the Lord and not to merely obtain a certain material objective. In fruitive performances, as well as in ordinary material activities, an incomplete performance does not yield results. Demigods reward the performers of fruitive sacrifice for correctly executing the rituals, and ordinary business transactions generate profit only after concluded. One may bake a cake, but until it is delivered and paid for, one does not get any money for it. Service to the Lord, however, operates in a different dynamic. The Lord sees not just the effort, but the intention. One can thus advance even without completing an activity. In fact, one can advance even without starting, as long as his intention is positive. Even though not completing his 100 sacrifices, Prithu Maharaj satisfied the Lord, and that's what counts. And you think about it, right? In the material realm, if you don't complete your education, you don't get that qualification. You don't apply for the promotion, you'll never get it. There's so many things that if I don't do this, I'll never advance to that. But Krishna is so different, that even if you just have the intention to please him and to serve him, he will accept that and he will reward accordingly, right? Because ultimately, spiritual submission means that I'm willing to be changed by the Lord and purified by my association with the devotees and my practice, and just changed into who I truly am, the spirit soul who is part and parcel of Krishna. I will stop there. Any corrections, comments, questions? Nope. Oh, yes.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you for your very detailed preparation for this class. Thank you. You said many things, but we have a problem in our society that we don't really have facilities to donate cows. You mentioned about we should donate cows. But we're not in a society that we like to accept donated cows, even if somebody wanted to do it. Could you make a comment about that?
About if someone wants to donate a cow?
You're mentioning that King Rig, he donated 10,000 cows. And you mentioned we should do things like that. But it's not so easy. There's not a temple in the world that exists that would accept a cow, practically speaking. So we're a bit away from the Vedic culture where we can donate cows.
Well, lucky in Krishna consciousness, we have a workaround for everything. So what I like to do, because yes, donating a cow, especially in this economy, is too expensive. And the poor person who receives that cow, they may not be able to maintain. But what I do is there are many places that do look after cows. There are many Gaushalas. And they offer, like, you can donate to feed them, for example. Or you can donate the amount that it takes to look after the cow for like 1 year or something like that. And not just cows, whatever you can see, like in the spiritual community, for example, those of us that come to this temple and are familiar with it, we know what the needs of the temple are, whether it be, fruit and vegetables or rice or ghee or, money itself to, go towards the electricity, lights, whatever. Those kind of things, that what am I doing with my sort of charitable contribution to society that's beneficial? That, okay, in previous yugas you would donate cows, you would donate elephants and gold and jewelry, but that's not practical for this age. So what can I do? There are Gaushalas, or I think recently I just actually gave a donation where, you sponsor like the grass for 1 day to feed them, and then they'll buy that and feed the cows. Or just, sharing spiritual knowledge with other people is in itself charity as well. Krishna in this age, he says that the dharma or the activity for this age is the chanting of his names, specifically because we are not purified to do like rituals and sacrifices and yagyas properly. Like, the demigods, if you're going to do a yagya for them, every single word must be pronounced perfectly. But those kind of brahmanas are very rare in this age who can do it so perfectly. So Krishna says that in this age, just chant my name. That is the endeavor for this age. So we can do that if we're inclined to more other charitable things like the cows and things like that. The facility is there in the society. But ultimately, Krishna is happy when we just share whatever knowledge we have with other people. I don't know if that, yeah.
No, thank you very much. That's a very good answer. It's also worth reminding us, though, that Srila Prabhupada didn't leave us just with that. He wanted us actually to have an alternative society based on the Bhagavatam. And the Bhagavatam is completely surrounded by cows.
Yes.
And Srila Prabhupada wanted every temple to have a farm.
Yes.
And that the food, the flowers, and the milk comes from our own cows.
Yeah.
So it's all worth reminding us that this is also part of our mission, to spread Christian consciousness, but also to establish this rural aspect of our temple. So we want to come to the day when the deity is here, that all their butter, all their milk, all their yogurt, all their ghee comes from a cow that we know is protected.
Yes.
So we have a very large mission, not only to make everyone in South Africa Krishna conscious, but we also have a mission to establish a Vedic farm society where cows are protected, and our own milk comes from those protected cows.
Yes, yes.
Just thought I'd add to those thoughts that you shared.
Yes, thank you, Prabhu. Yes, Prabhupada is very serious about cow protection and Varnashram Dharma. And at least, well, we have our little small stride towards that. We have our little Goshala outside of Pietermaritzburg. The cows, I don't think they give milk at the moment, but we're growing the flowers on that land. At least the marigolds that you see on the deities, a lot of them come from the, well, you could say not quite the farm as yet, but that's very true, Prabhu. Thank you for bringing that up. Anything else? No. Breakfast time then. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaura Premanande.